Welcome, friends. Please silence your phones. Today's presentation is on Search, Learn, and Apply Altruism. Next Sunday's is on Memory and Imagination. This being the first Sunday of the month, following this hour, we will continue with our readings and discussions of the Bhagavad Gita and related notes. You can find out more about us at www.ultdc.org, or better yet, by participating in discussions based on pure Theosophy here at the Washington, D.C. Area Lodge, 4865A Cordell Avenue, 3230, Bethesda, Maryland, zip 20814, every Sunday at 11 a.m. for presentations and to share your understanding in our question and answer periods. All are invited to attend. We then go out and try to better apply this common sense philosophy from the Masters of Wisdom, knowing that it is worthless unless we make it a life to be lived. We are guided by the declaration that Robert Crosby used in 1909 to launch ULT, and it's on the back of our program, thereby returning the teachings, Mr. Crosby did, to the lines laid down by the great founders through their messenger, H.B. Blavatsky, and her staunch colleague, William Q. Judge. To this end, we work independently and with each other to achieve a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. We hold that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. We have neither bylaws, constitution, nor officers. The sole bond between us associates is the furtherance of unity. We regard as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And we welcome to our association all those who are in accord with the purposes of our declaration and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is from The Voice of the Silence here, starting on page 67. We find these words. Behold it written, ere the gold flame can burn with steady light, the lamp must stand well guarded in a spot free from all wind. Exposed to shifting breeze, the jet will flicker, and the quivering flame cast shades deceptive, dark and ever-changing, on the soul's white shrine. And then, O pursuer of the truth, thy mind soul will become as a mad elephant that rages in the jungle. Mistaking forest trees for living foes, he perishes in his attempts to kill the ever-shifting shadows dancing on the wall of sunlit rocks. Beware, lest in the care of self thy soul should lose her foothold on the soil of Deva knowledge. Beware, lest in forgetting self thy soul lose, or its trembling mind control. and forfeit thus the due fruition of its conquest. Beware of change, for change is thy great foe. This change will fight thee off and throw thee back out of the path thou treadest, deep into vicious swamps of doubt. Prepare and be forewarned in time. If thou hast tried and failed, O dauntless fighter, yet lose not courage. Fight on, and to the charge return again and yet again. The fearless warrior, his precious lifeblood, oozing from his wide and gaping wounds, will still attack the foe, drive him from out his stronghold, vanquish him ere he himself expires. Act then, all you who fail and suffer, act like him, and from the stronghold of your soul, chase all your foes away. Ambition, anger, hatred, even to the shadow of desire, when even you have failed. Remember, thou that fightest for a man's liberation, each failure is success, and each sincere attempt wins its reward in time. The holy gems that sprout and grow unseen in the disciple's soul, their stalks wax strong at each new trial. They bend like reeds, but never break, nor can they ever be lost. But when the hour has struck, they blossom forth. And now for today's talk on Search, Learn, and Apply Altruism.
Good morning and welcome, friends. Today's talk is Search, Learn, and Apply Altruism, but it has three sections to it, really. What exactly are we searching for? What is the motto of the Theosophical movement? It says there's no religion higher than truth. So we are searching for truth. And in order to search for that truth, we follow a particular path. Each human being holds ideas and they have a perception of what truth is. But we are also told that on earth we have relative truth. The path that this philosophy shows is to get to absolute truth. In other words, what is behind the reflective part of that truth, which is earth and what is here. Then it says learn. How do we learn? By studying, obviously. A lot of students think that it's just going to happen, but it does not. We have to spend continuous effort in studying the philosophy and learning it. And the altruistic part comes when we apply it to daily life and we disseminate it. We will open this talk from a statement from the Key, which was a kind of prediction for our century. And HPB, in writing this, she's telling us, if the present attempt, in other words, what she had started, succeeds better than the previous ones, because we know that every century some effort is made, but it never succeeds because of the interference with all of the other forces. It gets mixed up. Well, was the 19th century effort better? She's telling us that if it stays intact and is disseminated, the general condition of men's minds and hearts will have been improved and purified by the spread of its teachings, Theosophy, wisdom of the ages. And their prejudices and dogmatic illusions will have been, to some extent at least, removed. Not only that, but she has also telling us, she's also telling us that with all this philosophical writings, there is numerous literature available to a united body of people who are going to act as torchbearers of truth. And this organized philosophy with its torchbearers will remove mechanical and material obstacles and difficulties from the path. And then she tells us, think how much such an opportunity, when provided to one, what they can achieve in the world. She's talking about the end of the 20th century. But today, we know that no one came at the end of the 20th century. Not only that, the Dalai Lama is telling us that he is the last one in that lineage of Tsongkhapa that was started in 14th century. And this effort has been, this impulse has been put into the West through that effort. So now, and Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama or Teshu Lama confirm one another. And we all know the Teshu Lama was taken hostage by the Chinese around 1995, I believe, and he has never been seen. And the Chinese have actually assigned an individual into that post that they have chosen. So where are we going with this is the question. Is the spiritual element in our lives being diminished is what we need to ask. And then she finishes it this way. Consider all this and then tell me whether I am too sanguine when I say that if the Theosophical Society survives and lives true to its mission, to its original impulses through the next 100 years, tell me, I say, if I go too far in asserting that Earth will be a heaven in the 21st century in comparison with what it is now. Well, we can give all the hints and talks, but each human being must make their own decisions, but it needs to be an informed one, not based on dogma, but based on what is going on around us today. Even though this knowledge comes from the heavens, we have to apply it to our living here on earth. So then let us see what was said. And each one of us have come in contact in searching the truth, studying the secret doctrine. And this is a unique experience. Once we read it, we know that the secret doctrine is not like other books. We cannot approach it in the same manner that we have approached other books. And then it comes to our attention that it has a mine of information in it. But soon we discover the treasures contained in it cannot be available to us with the simple process of just reading it. The elusive character of its information puzzles us until it is born in us that information, giving information, is not its primary effort. So then we think and ask ourselves, why so much information in it is there? And we know that just obtaining information can be really dangerous. We have to then examine our intentions. Why do we want it? And what is the necessary faculty in obtaining it? Well, we persistently and continuously study it, but still we cannot get at it as to what it is in there, then we finally figure out that will force, that power or faculty in us, has to be activated. So, in order to get to truth, we're searching. Will force. Will force. We have it, but it's not active. When we look around, there are two groups of students in all of the Theosophical organization. One group comes because they want to obtain something for themselves. They want to obtain power, they want to have information, they want to cultivate themselves. And the second group comes because they want to disseminate it. They want to be charitable and give these ideas to the general public to make our society useful to the nation we are a part of, and then perhaps being disseminated all through the world, it will kind of leaven everything eventually. So the second class then are the individuals that count most for Theosophy. There is underlying motive that has brought them, and the motor power or will force lies at the root of that capacity for service. So this willpower as creative energizing force does not express itself on any plane lower than that of impersonal altruism. So service is the intent here. And impersonal altruism does not express itself, we are told, on any lower plane at all. So it's a spiritual force, obviously. What is our spiritual higher components? We gave a talk and said it is Atma Buddhi Manas, and the monad as Buddhi Manas. It's a spiritual discernment or wisdom in conjunction with the higher mind. So that is where it is active. And the moment it descends, it's not altruism anymore, because it robes itself either intellect or emotion or some other factor, and it may become patriotism, ecstasy, the creative mood of the artist or genius. It may be the intense concentration of the philosopher, but it is not the spiritual will. So then, human altruism is responded to by that vibration which we call will force. So altruism and will force is interconnected. It's connected. So then, how do we go about activating it? Well, we have many a time said before that higher altruism requires sacrifice. What is the sacrifice for? For the whole. The part has to sacrifice to the whole. So the sacrifice is to the whole, not anything less. Otherwise, it's not altruism. And what else comes into it is justice. We have many a time also said that the universe is ruled under karma and that means under a strict justice. So, the strict justice. The strict justice rules the world. We are also part of that whole. So whatever it is that we are doing, we have to include ourselves in it as well, because we are part of that whole. So what we are doing has to be just for us as well as for the rest of the world. So there is no contradiction between sacrifice and altruism. The two go together. Without justice, sacrifice in the true sense is not possible. So this particular and definite mode of action accompanies a particular and definite kind of sacrifice. For the theosophical student, this action in sacrifice, though, for theosophy, is the propagation of ideas. Ideas. To begin to propagate theosophical concepts, which we are already familiar, using the proper discrimination and being sure that we are just to others and to ourselves, we shall find that we are beginning to sacrifice ourselves for others. The pouring out of ourselves for our brother men will energize us with that willpower lying behind the faculty of comprehension, which enables us to gain for ourselves more profound knowledge to be again propagated. So, this profound knowledge we can only get at in the Secret Doctrine and all of the other theosophical writings when we start propagating ideas that is presented in the books. It is not the words. We can't memorize any particular sentence from those books, but if we don't understand the idea behind it, it's of no value to us, because HPB never writes anything twice with the same words. She has all kinds of different words to express the same idea, but what she's trying to activate in us is that intuitive center, which is dependent on this will force. Without it, it's not active. Many places it is stated that she wrote these books 2 planes above where we are. Where does that take us? If we are kama-manasic in this stage of our development, then comes the higher mind, and then comes Buddhic. So she's writing it from the Buddhic plane. What is the Buddhic plane? It's the spiritual plane. It's where wisdom is. And this is why we can't get at that knowledge in the book until we also are willing to sacrifice for the whole through this strict justice in the propagation of ideas. So we obtain the profound knowledge, and then we go out and disseminate it to others. So it says, for whoever with deliberation commences to propagate theosophical ideas begins to energize himself for the service of the race. His growing energization develops in him an ever-expanding willpower, which in its turn enables him to contact and act upon the plane of pure altruism, the highest plane comprehensible to men. So the men of science, philosopher, artist, not being able to reach this pure altruism is due primarily to their objective. for the purpose for which they seek their knowledge. It is, to the scientific or philosophical student, knowledge for the sake of knowledge. For the artist, art for art's sake. And such knowledge as gained is made use of for the advancement of the expansion of the senses, the emotions, and the mind. Therefore, their altruism is limited. On the other hand, the student of Theosophy seeks his knowledge not for the sake of knowledge, not for the sake of his own growth, but for the spiritual betterment of the race, of which he is a part of. Therefore, his altruism and its field of action is unlimited. So altruism and its field of action is what? Illimitable. And this is what makes the difference. It's not limited, it's unlimited. So, when he starts generating these spiritual forces, he's helping destruction of human misery and suffering, and HPV tells us this way. Man's spiritual intuitions are fully opened, which will not happen before we fairly cast off our thick coats of matter until we begin acting from within instead of ever following impulses from without. So this moving from within, this is the faculty which the study of Theosophy demands from us. It's not a choice, it's a demand. So, within. So it is interior to ourselves. It's not outside, it's on the inside. And it says that the faculty cannot come into action unless we begin to practice altruism, unless we begin to live the truths of Theosophy and to teach only as we live it. So, what was that truth that we're searching for? What is the highest we are capable of? What is it that we're looking for? We want to know what is the highest aim achievable for humanity. And everywhere it is told to us that perfectibility is our goal. Perfectibility is our goal. And we cannot achieve it until we provide service for the whole and sacrifice ourselves through that. And of course, in that sacrifice, we're also saving ourselves. But when it comes to people and their afflictions we all have. We are all suffering and we want to be happy, we want to have enough to survive on, we want to be able to provide for our children. And most humanity at this time, even though the churches have lost their power, people are born into certain religious backgrounds. We all are. And this 21st century is requiring from us independent thought. Do you need to take this?
Thank you.
Yes.
independent thought. Independent thought. We cannot listen to authority. No one can be an authority in Theosophy unless one is a perfected being or an initiate. We are all students of Theosophy trying to decipher what the book is telling us, what the path is, and have to follow it, each on his own with help from all the other older students. But if we do not practice independent thought, we will not achieve our goal. We cannot follow others. We have to follow the inner voice. And for that, the voice of the silence has been written, and she dedicated to the few because she knew most of us somewhere along the line would give it up and not go all the way. And it is stated everywhere that there can be no permanent liberation for a single unit apart from the race to which that unit belongs. Man is an everlasting warrior, the goal of his battles being the attainment and the maintenance of his own immortality. The immortality which may be attained apart from the rest of the evolutionary life lasts only for that manvantara, in which that particular battle has been fought and won. The immortality which spans the long periods of silence between manvantaras can only be maintained in conjunction with all other struggling units. So humanity then is composed of the struggling units. We are all in it together. Humanity is one family. Oh, with one family. We are one family. We cannot separate ourselves from the rest of the world. All nations compose that one family. We are all part of one another. But when we look around, whether it is to church, in other words, religious teachings or scientific teachings, we find that it comes really short of what we are searching for. One is materialistic. It only does material research. The other one is dogmatic. It tells you what to do. Does not encourage independent thinking. It's lacking. It tells you, it gives you a formula that you have to do in order for your salvation. Salvation is not for one unit. Salvation only comes for all of the units when that effort is a united front. So, if we look at Buddha's life and his experience for searching truth, when he resolved to discover the cause of sickness, decay, and death, he inquired of the other teachers. He traveled around asking all the teachers he was aware of to explain him and to enlighten him as to how this salvation was to be obtained. And to his disappointment, they were all after personal salvation. Buddha's first task after enlightenment was to make the life-giving message of Theosophy available to all and not merely to the Brahmins who jealously sought its monopolization. So then here we find those beings who come to guide us. They simply come to guide us. What happens to them is that we crystallize them. We make something different of their mission all the time and try to change what was said to suit our own limited understanding and ideas. Unfortunately, that's what happens to all of them. So then this attitude of the mind and the way of living, especially in the West, is looking outside of ourselves to find solutions. Looking outside. Of ourselves. Of ourselves to find solutions. It is mostly based on that fearful one life theory with its accompanied conditions. Whereas when we find this philosophy and it touches us, well, then we find out that karma and reincarnation in our cycles, which is the third fundamental, is part of this philosophy. The East has already been in this philosophical condition, applying it to their lives for the whole period, historical period. What about the West? We don't believe in continuity of consciousness. We do not believe in karma and reincarnation. The highest that we can achieve is perfectibility. How is that possible to be achieved in one lifetime is the question. No reasoning mind can accept a one-time life with all its different conditions and our aptitudes that we're going to, at the end of it, reach this perfect condition. Even when we start moving on towards the path, it takes preparation. It's called cleaning our natures inside out in order so that we can step a foot on it. But once we step our foot on it, that's when our real difficulties start, because to traverse that path requires absolute purity of mind, absolute physical purity, absolute conviction that comes from the inner heart that we're on the right path, and regardless of what difficulties come, we stay with it. We don't fluctuate and turn our back on it, because we are warned that in each life, if we do that, it becomes much more difficult to be able to find it and get on it. So we will stop here and answer your questions. Yes?
You mentioned the Teshu Lama and his disappearance, and also no physical body coming out to the 1975 cycle. Is that a sort of omen of things to come? We have now gone as far as we're going to go into materialism, and we've got to dig our way back out?
Well, we get this help according to our behavior. And do we welcome this assistance? Remember that this movement is always in the world, but it came out in force for this 19th century effort, because it was conjunction of different cycles coming together, and the lodge, the Great Lodge, felt that it was the right time to infuse it into the world. You have to look at what it has done. It has crushed the Victorian Age thinking and opened it outward. A new thought movement has come into place, but it falls short. It falls short because very few students embrace this philosophy in its totality, and we all are prejudiced. We have preconceptions from wherever we come from, and we try to fit the philosophy into ourselves by changing it. Whereas this says you have to change yourself and fit yourself into the philosophy in order to understand it. And many of us are not able to do it. But they tell us how to do it. And if we don't follow it, it's not their fault. It's our own fault. If we don't want to do it, this is a free choice example here. We either are willing to do it or we are not. It cannot be forced upon us. Altruism, though, is the key here. Because if we want to activate the spiritual ideas in us that is going to make a difference in moving our nation and the whole world forward, then it becomes necessary that we do it. The sacrifice is not easy to do, but once that we have perceived its truthfulness within, then I think then we can follow it. This is not something that can be put into people from the outside. It's an inner awakening to the powers that are dormant, and as the soul is able to impregnate the personality and show the way, then it opens it out. And once that we are truly dedicated to it, then the books open out and it shows you the inner meaning as to what that really means. Its peculiar way of being put together is very puzzling in the ordinary sense if you're just looking at the words. But once that inner meaning opens out, you know why it was organized that way, because it makes perfect sense. So she is teaching from a different plane, and we have to prepare ourselves to obtain all the truth in it that was given. There are a lot of gaps when we have to fill it in.
So this is a spiritual exercise requiring a lot of intellectual thought too, but not intellectual as we conceive of it in this society. We really have to work at it, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, we always start with intellectual, okay? Every student starts reading that book with their intellect. If you stop here, though, what have you done for yourself? We just said that motor power, called willpower, is only active on that plane where you're exercising what? Altruism. That your action is for the whole, not for yourself, not for gaining powers for yourself. But if it is tinged, it says, with something personal, it immediately changes its character. What does it what happens to it? It becomes psychic energy. And this is why a lot of the students fall, because they think they're doing altruistic work when they are not. They change the philosophy according to their limited understanding and then give it to the world as the truth. That is a crime, it is stated, against humanity. It needs to be preserved the way it is. We are all limited in our understanding, and it's okay. We give what we have learned, but we don't try to change it. Our understanding might be limited, and what we are giving out is limited, but it doesn't mean that you're trying to change the philosophy. That's where you are, and that's from where you are, you're giving it out. And everybody understands that. There are no beings that are authority in this. That is why independent thought is necessary, and that discrimination that we have to use to come to some decision-making process as to how you're going to approach giving it out. But it is very evident that once you start giving it out, the learning you are doing is making your knowledge base expansive. You can give more and more out, because what did it say? It becomes unlimited. Your power of giving becomes unlimited. Where is it coming from? From the core, Buddhic core, that is available to each human being. And those real teachers have that at their disposal. They give it as truth because they know what the truth is. But it's also written that language itself can camouflage or not perhaps be able to explain its true meaning. And HBB did tell us that in the future the language of humanity will be Sanskrit, because Sanskrit is the language of the gods. And since this is a heavenly giving out, the knowledge comes from the root, then of course it will be better for us and help us understand it better. But in the meantime, then we have to work with the English language, which she told us was very limited in its ability to express these truths. There's a little something here in this that this student came across. It's from the Secret Doctrine. She tells us, language, she says, is certainly coeval with reason and could never have been developed before men became one with the informing principles in them. Those who fructified and awoke to life the monastic element dormant in primitive men. So our very desire to formulate the spirit of the teachings is to help develop an adequate language. It's also in there. We can at least make the effort, and in so doing, perhaps discover the limitation is not so much in our language as in the haziness of our ideas and lack of will to clarify them. So, as you go along, your own perception of things becomes clarified, and in relation to that, the language you use becomes more precision-oriented. The haziness in your deliverance disappears, and you use the correct terminology in expressing what you can from where you stand. The attempt, it says, to make clean our mental conceptions and perceptions necessitates the legitimate use of language as a vehicle of the monastic being. What we have been told is that this age has become what? Sophisticated. What does that mean? Why should we be called sophisticated? Well, one reason is because we don't express ourselves clearly. What people say, most of the time they don't mean. And what they mean, they don't say. So, yeah, we have become sophisticated because we twist everything around to suit ourselves as to what we're trying to imply to the people. But the sophistication does not mean that we're expressing any truth, because the language was developed in expression of the monastic element. In other words, our mind was truthful at the beginning, but once we got more and more immersed in material life, we forgot what the truth is. We don't talk about the truth anymore. So, in a way, the sophistication is not serving us very well, because suppose we were telepathic and we could read the other person's mind, and then her mouth is telling you something, or his mouth is telling you something, but that's not what they're thinking. What would you do then? Because that's how we were before. we telepathically communicate it. There are people or tribes on Earth, Jeffrey gave a talk on it, that actually are telepathic. They do not use language to communicate. But that requires honesty, does it not? So sophistication has obviously removed our honesty away. Honesty. How else would you be telepathically communicating with somebody? If you're thinking something and your mouth is saying something else, you won't be able to camouflage it anymore. So, yeah, this is a real condition for our society today, because the news, when it comes on, you even do not know if that's the real thing or not anymore, because of the language used. Are we expressing the truth, or are they making it attractive to gather listeners or people to watch it? This has to be clarified eventually. We have to become truthful and express truth verbally as well as thought-wise. So this philosophy actually demands it of us, that we become truthful. Why? Because it says unless you live it, you cannot make it alive in you. In order to make it alive, you have to live what you are learning and disseminate it as sacrifice to the whole in giving yourself to it. It's that play in the voice of the silence, this little self sacrificing itself to this self, and this to this one, self of all. So there is progressive sacrificial acts that we perform, but it is not because you want something, it's because you have realized that that's the right thing to do, and you go ahead and do it. And at the beginning they tell us, don't expect great things from yourself. That's not where you are. You are wherever you are, and do what you can each and every day, and don't worry about it. When you have increased, what is the right terminology there? Ability grows with effort. I think that's one of the statements. Ability grows with effort. Yeah. So wherever we are, that's the ability we have, and it doesn't mean we cannot use it. We can use our discrimination and the ability we have and go ahead and do all those paramitas, the charitable, loving things that we can for others, for our family and our community, and enlarge it to our nation, comes from this statement right here. That as you do it, more capabilities grow out of you. In other words, you're expanding your horizons in being able to help, because your discrimination is increasing as to what is the right thing to do at the right time, what is the right thing to say without hurting people. At first, you go along with the process that is demanded of you, honesty. And then you learn how to make that honesty expressed in soft speech, for instance. That's a capacity that you develop as you go along. You're trying to apply the philosophy in a softer way without hurting other people's feelings, because people make this personal to themselves. The person who gives it is not personal. They have no personality. Remember, they're impersonal. But people, when they apply it to themselves, they cry and they carry on and they get offended because they're personalizing it. This philosophy is not personal, but that's what people do. They personalize it. It's an impersonal philosophy. It's for everyone, and its application, once it's undertaken, that statement we read from the key will make, what did she say? Tell me, I say, if I go too far in asserting that Earth will be a heaven in the 21st century in comparison with what it is now. And each one can decide if we are going towards heavenly existence on Earth, or we are still struggling with the same issues. Materialistic science, dogmatic religion has lost its power to some degree. Scientific discoveries, HPB tells us somewhere, is our, what's the right word? You know, they help us, is our helpers. Because the facts that they come up with, if interpreted correctly, would lead to higher realms of understanding. But it's the interpretation that comes short because they are materializing everything. But nevertheless, the facts on the material plane, when interpreted correctly, will give us the clues. And this is available to us. So, yeah, she does tell us, she quotes from a whole bunch of scientists in the Secret Doctrine. Yes?
One more question. We're a mile away from NIH with all that brain power over there, the scientists and so forth. And I keep looking at that word intellect. With all that, it seems like they would have a leg up on understanding and applying this philosophy.
Well, intellect is a necessary part of our growth process. But intellect and karma, the passions and desires, have become co-joined. We never write them separately there because they are enmeshed together. Intellect and karma. Here we go. This is our lower mind here. Intellect and karma. Karma work together. This is passions and desire. Without desire, there is no movement. Desire moves us to do things, okay? So this is a necessary part, but karma has been perfected. Now we need to grow out of it and move towards the higher realms of existence. This is the Aquarian Age. This is the age of compassion. We're not going to go anywhere if we segregate ourselves from the whole. That is the necessary step for humanity to understand that we are all interlinked, intercommunication, inter-understanding. That connectedness has to be understood, not just among human beings of one nation, but human beings of all nations. The suggestion is that what we consider undeveloped nations have other things to offer, to put into the bag. Everything is not measured by wealth, external wealth, what you can have. Some nations are not materialistic. They have a spirituality. And what they can contribute is on those higher planes of existence. And that would help humanity move forward. So we can't say some peoples are underdeveloped because they have other qualities to contribute to the welfare of humanity in general. So until we understand that and start to work for the whole, even if it is a small group of people you're working for, it's better than working for yourself. So
what you're talking about, though, is that rich materialist is the worst off of anyone.
Well, the intellect, he tells us, can grow to be gigantic. And these men have gigantic intellects. And they're scientists and chemists, biologists, medicine people, and they discover a lot of stuff that are useful. But she says that growth is at the expense this intellectual growth excuse me, is at the expense of spirituality. That there is no spirituality left in them eventually, and that the nature pulls downward because there is not that higher mind entity involved in it. It's just the intellectual part. Intellectual giants does that growth. Intellectual giants. She says this growth is at the expense of that spirituality that we wish for so much, because we can't go anywhere without it. And at the end of one life, all of what he has learned is going to be gone out of him, because the personality will be just left right here. It's going to be individuality that's going to go forward. And if you don't have anything spiritual in you, what are you retaining in the Sutratman? Then becomes a question. The Sutratman being the Atmabuddhi monastic entity going into the rest period, and then it's going to come out again once that period is finished and carry on with its work. What is it retaining from here? Anything? Yeah, we have to think about these things. Thank you for coming, and please join us next week.